Hey yo, what's good though? Soul here, and welcome back to my story mode. You've seen the title, you've seen the thumbnail, it's not apparent what we're going to be talking about today. The thing is though, this isn't something that we haven't already talked about plenty of times already. We've just never had a very focused discussion on it. As a matter of fact, let's go ahead and just lay down a little truth right now. About 80% of the reason as to why anybody even probably found my channel and the stuff that I talk about is because they feel that in some way, shape, or form, Pokemon has been failing them. Now, of course, as a big fan of the Pokemon franchise, this is not me saying that I hate it. Far from it. In fact, I love the series so much, which is why it's so frustrating to see it go down the path that it has. So why is it after all this time that we're finally making a focused video on this very topic? Well, for three reasons. One, if we're keeping it 100, is because it's a downtime with Pokemon right now, and I don't really have a lot else to talk about, so I figured, hey, why not just throw some stuff out there that I've been meaning to talk about. Two is absolutely because of Scarlet and Violet's first DLC. While I will say I had fun with the DLC, and I'm sure a lot of others can agree with me. However, if there's one thing we can all definitely agree on, is that the quality of it sucks almost as bad, if not more, than the base game. The textures still look super gross, the areas are either bland or super desolate, and it's just... there's just not much going on there outside of the story. A DLC price like that that's already sitting on top of a game that we paid AAA title price for should not feel and look as muddy as it does. You see what I'm saying here? Pokemon Scarlet and Violet isn't inherently bad, but there's so much... ironically, I don't know how else to put this, there's so much muck covering it that it's hard to give it the praise that we want to in certain aspects when it's just so muddled. Long and short, there's no better word for this situation other than unfortunate. But anyway, another reason is because we're at such a low and dangerous point with the Pokemon series that even the Pokemon company themselves have acknowledged this. Or at least they kinda, sorta, somewhat acknowledged it in some ways. Now I meant to talk about this a while back, but about a month before the DLC released, there was a really interesting little article floating around. The title of it reads, and I quote, "Pokemon Company having conversations about how to ensure game quality with regular releases." There was an interview with Utsunomiya at the Pokemon World Championship that reads, "I think in general, if you look at the past, the path we've taken up until now has been this constant release, always regularly releasing products on a fairly fixed kind of cadence, you might say. Always having these products able to be introduced and new experiences for our customers, and that's how we've operated up until now. I think we're still operating that way, but there's more and more conversations as the development environments change about how we can continue to do this while making sure that we're ensuring really quality products are also being introduced." Yeah, reading that out loud, it's much worse than I thought. All this dude basically said was, we're in the talks about making sure that we have quality games while also still keeping our cadence of release schedules. But that right there is exactly the problem. You can't have both. It's more than obvious that Pokemon Company has chosen to make sure that you guys are on a fixed schedule to release games and stuff like that. Therefore, they have chosen to sacrifice quality. I'm sorry, but there's no way you could look at any of the games in the past, like, almost decade that have been on the Switch and tell me that we have had quality. I mean, you could say that Pokemon Let's Go is the best functioning game and stuff on the Switch, but at the same time, they had a very easy baseline blueprint to follow, despite whatever work that they had to put into that game. Not that I'm knocking them for any of that, because I definitely couldn't do it, but there's no way in hell that building a game like that was nearly as hard as building a game from absolute scratch like Generation 8 and Generation 9. Ever since a certain point in time, I don't know when exactly it was, they decided that they needed to at least focus on making one specific thing work for these games. Now, there's definitely going to be some things that I might be incorrect on here, so you can correct me all you want, but in Generation 8, they kinda focused on the gimmick, Dynamaxing, Gigantamaxing, making those big battles look good and work good. Of course, they kinda managed to make the region look decent, but after that, pretty much everything else suffered. Graphical style? Mid. Story? Non-existent. Post-game? Absolutely none unless you're willing to spend the $30 to $40 for the DLC. After that, naturally, was the Gen 4 remakes, which is where everybody started to draw the line, because of course, they focused on one aspect, making those remakes faithful but in a newer, modern style, and in turn, everything else suffered. It was so rushed, in fact, that Game Freak didn't even have the time to do it themselves. They had to rush Ilka to do it. So, in turn, the only real thing that's worth doing in those remakes is going to the underground and catching Pokemon that you wouldn't usually use on a general playthrough. Then we move on to Pokemon Legends, which came out literally just a couple of months later. I will never be able to physically stress enough how much they did not need to do that, by the way. Pokemon Legends Arceus could have easily been Pokemon's holiday 2022 release. But no. Okay, whatever. Anyways, in that game, they decided to focus on the gameplay aspect, making sure that the trainer was fun to utilize by making us be able to sprint and dodge roll and be able to throw Pokeballs, whether it be our own Pokemon or just Pokeballs to catch Pokemon that are out in the field. A lot of us can agree that that gameplay was some of the best that we have ever had in a Pokemon game before. Unfortunately though, much like the previous two games, everything else managed to suffer in its wake. Very weak story and unfortunately even weaker characters, and as much as I hate to say it, unfortunately muddy graphics. And that really sucks because that game is so much fun, much more fun than literally any Pokemon game I've played in the last decade. I have and will always agree that gameplay of a video game is always going to be the most important aspect. However, the gameplay itself cannot always carry the game. Everything else is still very much capable of bogging it down. Which is why, of course, that brings us directly into today with Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. In my personal opinion, the strongest part about this game is absolutely its writing. It's got a much more fun and unique take on the general Pokemon adventure by placing us in a region that is pretty much centered around a school. On top of that, with Nemona, Arven, and Penny, we have a pretty relatively interesting cast. Added on to the fact that you're participating in 3 separate storylines that you can involve yourself in at any given time. And to put that final cherry on top, this is our first fully, truly open world Pokemon game. So in a way, while I do say that one of the strongest points of this game is its writing, I think one of the biggest things about the game overall is the fact that it's just so ambitious. It tries to do so many different things, pretty much everything that it possibly can to bring something new to the table for a Pokemon game. I'm sure a lot of you have already heard this phrase by now at least one time in your life, but in trying to be good at everything, you'll end up being good at almost nothing. I say almost in terms of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet because, like I said, I enjoy the story very much. But, once again, in turn, because of this, everything else manages to suffer. The world itself, while it's big, is not very interesting. It's nice to be able to interact with Pokemon the way that we do in this world, that's cool and all, but other than that, you can't even talk to regular NPCs very much. The few times you can talk to NPCs, unless they're Pokemon trainers, they don't really have anything interesting to offer. You know what though? I have to stop myself because once again I almost talked about the functionality of the game. We don't need to go into that anymore. We're actually done talking about that. My point is, they managed to focus on one thing, then they tried to focus on everything else, and in turn, they pretty much focused on nothing. So, in turn, they damage the quote-unquote quality of the games that they want to keep up so badly. So, to answer the original question here of how to keep up the cadence, you don't. You don't focus on timely releases at all. You focus on the quality of the product. That is it, and that is all that matters. When you focus on the quality of the product, then everything else starts to improve and make sense for everybody. The first thing you improve would probably end up being the conditions at Game Freak. Game Freak has been the developers of these games since the beginning. They are literally the reasons why Pokemon is as popular as it is. The games are so absolutely crucial and important to the franchise, it's not even funny. Therefore, Game Freak is partially your bread and butter. So please explain to me why it feels like every time I play one of these newer games, it feels like every single one of the employees and staff there are on a leash with a bomb strapped to their chest every year. It doesn't matter how fast you need somebody to work, they can only get the job so properly done with a gun to their heads. What a lot of people don't understand, especially in the development department for these games, is that it's not Game Freak making the calls. It's Pokemon Company rushing Game Freak to have a holiday release out every year. Game Freak as a development company is actually incredible. There's a lot of developers out there that aren't nearly capable of doing what Game Freak does in the limited amount of time that they have. Getting games of these scales to function the way that they do in the time that they have is actually a huge feat, especially when you consider the fact that not only are these people absolutely understaffed, but they are split in multiple directions to work on multiple projects that all have a very limited work window. This is literally proven in my discussion as to whether or not Pokemon Legends is better or worse than Scarlet and Violet. In that video, I discussed why they are both good and bad for completely opposite reasons. If you were to bring those two games together, it would be an almost perfect Pokemon game in some aspects, maybe besides the graphics, but that's neither here nor there. The point is that I can only imagine how frustrated these developers are. You can tell that in its concepts, character designs, attention to detail regarding like the continuity and world building from all of the regions put together, that there is love and care here. Unfortunately, they aren't given enough time to capitalize on these ideas and all of these different possibilities and stuff like that because they don't have the time to do it. So, you want to ensure quality? How about actually allowing the entire staff of Game Freak to actually come together and let the creators create? I'm sorry, but there is literally no such thing as rushed high quality. It doesn't exist. So, if you were to allow them to do what they actually want to do with these games, not only do you have a happier working environment, but then in turn, you actually have a quality product. And in turn, you have a much happier fan base that is willing to give you even more money. As a fan of the series, if you're here watching this video, I have to imagine that you too are some type of frustrated with it. I'm sure that there are plenty of you who are falling off or have already fallen off of the series because you don't like the direction that it's going in. Playing all of these games in hope that they're going to be better than the last and always ending up being disappointed in one way or another is truly exhausting. You can only do something like that so many times before your customers, because let's be honest, that's what you see us as, customers, get fed up. And as a customer of this franchise, I have to say that it is truly disappointing that these faults and these frustrations aren't limited to just the mainline games. If it's not the mainline games or the anime or the trading card game, most other things get shafted almost way worse. In one of my more recent videos, I talked about the frustration of not getting real spin-off games anymore. And the ones that we do get are either mobile games or an absolute mess like Detective Pikachu 2. The advertising was very weak, the little bit that we did see was looking like an upscaled 3DS game, and to top it off, we don't even have access to the first Detective Pikachu game anymore, so going into a sequel for a lot of people didn't make any sense. It was one thing that I never got to play the original Detective Pikachu. Truthfully, I probably could have just watched a playthrough on YouTube or something like that. However, the full price for a game like that? I don't know, man. But that's just it though. Why did they treat Detective Pikachu like an afterthought? I'm sure that the reason that they even thought it was worth doing was because the Detective Pikachu movie was actually pretty damn good. Not perfect though, but we're not going to talk about that today. But to even be considered a good adaptation of a video game for a movie is very, very rare. There are literally a handful of movies that barely make that mark. So then I look at Detective Pikachu 2 and think, damn, that's really unfortunate that this game was bound to fail. And now they think that we're not gonna want spin-offs like this anymore, which is so far from the case. But then again, I can't really say much for the future of Detective Pikachu 2 because ironically, at the time of this recording, they released a miniature animation for it, and it was actually super cute. So I really don't know what they're thinking with that specifically. But my point is, the spin-off games could use some work and, you know, maybe actually exist. But here's the thing. Here's the really frustrating thing to me that I truly do not understand. Why is it that their only pure sole focus is the children? Now, before anybody gets on me, don't worry, I fully understand why. That is exactly where the money is. In pretty much most mediums that I've seen throughout the entirety of my life, the ones that are dedicated to children usually are the most successful stuff. Children's books, easy to write. Children's shows, easy to write for and probably way less expensive because they don't have to worry as much about effects because kids don't care about that kind of thing. So, in the case of Pokemon, as long as they can see these cute little creatures on their screen or they can have it in their hand and go out and battle Pokemon, that's all they care about, right? And to an extent, that's totally fair because it's absolutely true. Younger kids don't really care about the technicalities of stuff. We certainly didn't when we were growing up with Pokemon. But you see though, what I just said there, that's just it. We grew up. Granted, of course, the series did get more complex in a lot of ways, including in the online aspect, but aside from that, rarely as older fans of the franchise are we actually acknowledged like that. As 20 to 30 somethings, we do care about quality of the games, we do care about graphics, we do care about functionality. That stuff actually matters to us. Aside from the money-munching apps, they've made zero effort to cater to their current demographic. They develop a lot of these things with children in mind, but a lot of the people, dare I say most of the people playing these games, are the ones that have been playing them since they were children. I'm not gonna go through this again because I think I've talked about this well and enough beforehand, but the long and short of it is, I was just really hoping that this series would have grown up with us a lot more than it already has, because as of right now, it's simply just unfortunate how disconnected they are with their fan base. I've written down a lot of stuff here, but at the end of the day, I just want this series to grow stronger, and it's hard to keep faith that it actually ever will. When I originally saw that article, there was a small part of me that hoped that maybe this was kind of their way of acknowledging that making games in such a short amount of time so fast for the holiday season of every year isn't a good long-term strategy, and that maybe, just maybe, acknowledging that mindset might lead to some better decisions down the line. But unfortunately, their pockets are really fat, so in reality, they have no reason to change up, but I don't know. For the time being, I feel like it might be too early to say because we really did hit a low point here with Scarlet and Violet in terms of quality. And so, we might be at a little bit of a breaking point here because if the next games are anything like Scarlet and Violet, whatever they happen to be, I really don't know what would happen next. But I guess that's just something we'll have to see about in the future. Probably around February when we see the remakes or something. So, I don't know. We'll play that by ear. But anyway, I think I've talked enough. Hell, frankly, I'm sure plenty of you are sick of me talking about this again because I've said a lot of this stuff before. None of this that I'm talking about in this video is anything new. But at the same time, I think it's good to have a constantly just ongoing sea of voices that talk about this kind of thing because, we love this series. We just want to see it get better. That's really all it is. Will they ever truly get better? I don't know. But one thing's for certain, they will be an empire until my final breath. So, we will see what happens. So, with that all being said, why don't you go ahead, grab that mic from behind your ear. Yep, that's not a quarter, it's the mic, and you tell me what you guys are thinking. Do you think that eventually Pokemon could have a serious turnaround and this franchise could go in a much better direction? Or are we fated to an absolute hellscape with this franchise and we aren't gonna go anywhere with it and it's just gonna stay as is? Tell me everything that you guys are thinking in the comment section below because you know for a fact that I am always down there with you guys. But with that, yeah, it does seem like it's about time to skedaddle. So, I'd like to thank you guys ever so much for watching. I truly do hope you enjoyed. Do me the greatest favor of dropping a like and a comment, and consider subscribing for more content just like this here. And with that, I'm Gonzo. Thanks again, hope you enjoyed, and I'll be seeing you guys in the next video. Do me the greatest favor of taking good ass care, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!